please welcome on stage our next game changer, Hilary Yip. حضورنا الكريم مع صانعة التأثير Hilary Yip.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, finally out of quarantine from Hong Kong. Today, I'll be telling you about Minor Minus, my journey with it, and what exactly we're doing and how I hope it'll make a change. So this entire thing started almost 5 years ago now, when I was 10 years old. Back then, I came across a kids' entrepreneurship competition, and I was intrigued. To enter, we had to come up with an idea that we thought could change the world. Deciding to deal with my biggest problem in life, learning Mandarin, I came up with the idea to leverage us kids' free time by teaching each other languages. So I entered with this concept and gave it a name, Minor Minus. M-I-N-O-R, minor, referring to us kids, and M-Y-N-A-S, minor, referring to a bird that learns new words and phrases extremely quickly and never forgets. Towards the end of that competition, we were given the opportunity to pitch at a huge government-led startup event in its inaugural year, so a lot of people were going to turn up. I jumped at the opportunity and prepared as well as I could for it. That paid off. After my presentation, a lot of people approached me, including my first mentor, who told me to schedule a meeting with him after the event if I were interested in taking my idea to the next level and turning it into reality. During that meeting, for which he took hours out of his very busy schedule, he told me about the entire life cycle of a startup, from idea to IPO and beyond. He even explained all the different types of investors, from angel investors to private equity firms. I was touched by how much he believed in me and my idea, and I thought to myself, if someone would take this idea for a competition that seriously, then surely it could really make an impact. I had a few conversations with my parents, and we decided to get started with the first step, customer testing. Over the next few months, we talked to prospective users, consulted with experts, and fine-tuned our idea. Originally, we wanted Minor Minus to be conducted through video calls, but we realized that that wouldn't work because of time zone issues and because kids found it really hard to break the ice. At the end of this process, when we were happy with our idea and exactly how we were going to execute it, we reached out to a local developer to help us build this app. The Minor Minus iOS app launched on the iOS App Store in 2017. Minor Minus is an online platform exclusively for kids, for us to learn from each other through chat groups. Kids can create these groups and will input a topic and the language in which it will be conducted. I originally expected these to be all about languages, centered around languages, but the reaction we got surprised me. We saw kids truly connecting from all around the world. I saw this one kid who taught more than 11 different languages, from Vietnamese all the way to Bulgarian. I saw kids who were homeschooling in America, making friendships with kids over in Indonesia, in Taiwan. I even saw kids telling me that in real life, they're really shy, but through Minor Minus, they were able to make some real friendships. These conversations went far beyond languages, but they were deep and spanned many different topics, from learning to code, all the way to discussing issues like bullying and autism. It was at that point where I realized Minor Minus had gone far beyond language learning. I also thought it could potentially solve another problem I'm sure the parents in the audience can relate to: screen time. When we kids go online, we actually have a fairly limited set of options. While you might be able to find a ton of different products, they fall into two main categories: video games and YouTube, or educational products. Both of these categories have systemic issues. Let's start by talking about video games and YouTube. This is fun, which is why kids love it, but it is also very unproductive as time goes down the drain. This sets up a lot of conflicts between parents and kids over how they spend their time. On the other hand, educational products gain instant approval because the kids are learning. But the content is very similar, if not the same, as what we're learning in schools. And for kids, sometimes after school, homework, and sometimes other classes, we just want a break. Furthermore, social media has completely revolutionized adult society. It has made making international connections as easy as clicking a single button. But we kids have been excluded from this because it is unsafe. So either we're restricted access, or we put ourselves into danger by going on regardless. Minor Minus can find a middle ground between all these topics, creating the best case scenario, creating a product that is fun, productive, social, and safe. I'm sure you guys are immediately thinking about safety, so let me address that. On the Minor Minus beta app right now, we've got two key security measures. First, parental supervision. All kids' accounts are tied to their parents. You will be able to see the full contents of the public groups your child is in. But for private chats, while you won't be able to see the content, because we still need a bit of privacy, you will be able to see who your kid is talking to, how often, and set restrictions based on age and gender. You can also ban the individual user if that is necessary. We have plans to add more features, including potentially AI solutions that will help screen the texts. Our second measure is a one-off paywall. So when kids want to join these groups, we charge a one-off charge of $1. When I mention this, people usually ask me, why do we do this? Because if we want this to be a global kids community, then surely we want to make it as accessible as possible. It exists for a very specific reason. At the moment where we charge this, with the credit card, we can pin it down to a verifiable human being. So should anything go wrong, we at least have a person that we can find. Now back to the community aspect. The human connection is a crucial part of Minor Minus and has been since the first day. Adults tend to underestimate the power we kids have when given a voice and a platform. Let me tell you about a group on Minor Minus right now. With the coronavirus outbreak, a lot of us have been stuck at home. In Hong Kong, we can't go to school until at least the middle of March. Kids on this group from the age of about 7 in Southeast Asia have come together to talk about how to stay safe, explaining why we need masks, why we can't go out, telling us about how their parents are dealing with the crisis. This shows that not only are kids paying attention to the world around them and taking in information, but they're also using that information that they gained to actively help other kids out. This brings me to my next point, learning. Learning is a key part of Minor Minus. We set out to provide the best possible online learning environment for kids to learn from each other in a peer-to-peer setting. The key difference with Minor Minus' approach is that we give kids the full autonomy to learn whatever they want. All groups are open to them, and they can join whichever ones they want. If there's anything that's not covered, they can create a group of their own to address that topic. Think about your own kid for a second. He or she may be unwilling to learn a certain topic in school, or go dead when they have to do homework. But that is because we're forcing them to learn that information. In fact, when we take our hands off completely, we become so much more passionate about our learning. If there's a topic that we love, we will spend hours researching online, talking to people, learning as much as we can, absorbing information like a sponge. That is the attitude we want to encourage on Minor Minus. This is backed up by research. According to the studies I read, there are 3 key factors we kids need to get the motivation to learn: autonomy, relevance, and competence. We just talked about autonomy, so let's talk about relevance. When we are in school, the information we learn generally tends to exist in a bubble. The information serves its purpose for the next test, and that is about it. there's limited explanation on how this relates to our daily lives, why this information is important to learn. With Minor Minors, we want to do the exact opposite. In these groups, the people who are teaching are passionate about these subjects. So they will tell you, why is this relevant? Why is this interesting? How this applies to your daily life, and how this may relate to other key topics that you may be interested in. For competence, this best relates with the teaching part of Minor Minors. When I mention that Minor Minors is a learning community, the first question I usually get is, who's doing the teaching? Well, that leaves out the peer-to-peer aspect. Half of Minor Minors is teaching, half of Minor Minors is learning. It is this flip side of the same coin. And this brings about a few unique benefits. When we try to teach something, we essentially have to remaster what we already know. And on Minor Minors, even if you're not an expert in that topic, this does help you break down your knowledge, reorganize it, and allows you to get more nuance and insight into that. And from our experience, kids on Minor Minors are so willing to teach and to learn. As I told you about that kid who teaches so many languages, he told me that he's actively encouraged to continue doing that because of how enthusiastic the kids are. They tell him, please create a YouTube video. I'd love to hear more about how you teach languages. And his approach is absolutely fascinating. Minor Minors is also a good environment to build soft skills, like 21st century skills. For those of you who may not know what they are, 21st century skills are a set of skills that educators agree on that are the important building blocks for our future. These include things like communication, initiative, and leadership. But the thing about 21st century skills are that it is not limited to the 21st century, but these are skills that we've always needed, whether in the past, the present, or the future. The added emphasis is here because of how technology has moved to the point where we don't need to memorize everything. In schools, I'm sure a lot of you have memorized the periodic table at some point. How often do you use that in your daily life? That's why soft skills are so important, because that gives us the means to work with other people, and that's what builds societies. But back to the point. Minor Minors is able to develop these skills uniquely because schools have limited time, and that time is focused on academia. On Minor Minors, we're able to integrate these skills into the very experience of it. Initiative comes when kids actively decide to learn and actively decide to teach. Leadership comes when kids are teaching on Minor Minors, creating that curriculum to help others out. And communication, that definitely happens, whether it's trying to get the point across, asking questions, or hanging out in one of the more fun groups and just chatting with one another. In the future, we plan to bring on other online education vendors, so to create a bit more accreditation to the knowledge and to build in a bit more formalized learning. This isn't to say we're getting rid of the peer-to-peer aspect. We're just adding another layer onto it to make the learning experience richer. My vision for this is for kids to hang out in the peer-to-peer section, have as much fun in it as possible, satisfy your curiosity, teach what you're passionate about. To go onto these courses, pick up some new skills, pick up some new information, and to go back onto Minor Minors and reteach it, consolidating your knowledge, and giving kids a glimpse into these courses that they can try out, or to access the information if they don't have the means to do so. In addition to all these problems I mentioned earlier, there's one more thing I hope Minor Minors can contribute a solution to. As I'm sure we're all aware, we live in a very conflicted world. Societies seem to be ever more polarized, no matter where we are. I'm from Hong Kong. I know that very clearly. While there will never be a single solution, I think Minor Minors can help by starting early. It is proven that when we are in a more diverse community, we naturally become more tolerant. But the thing about that approach is that when we wait till we're adults, when we wait to a certain age, sometimes the damage has already been done, and it is much harder to unlearn old habits than it is to learn in the first place. That is a trend that pretty much goes in a lot of different industries, whether it is relearning in general or relearning specific things. With minor minors, I hope that we can just learn in the first place. But minor minors is in a unique position to do this because of how international our communities are. Our users hail from almost 60 countries. This means we've got a whole wide group of ideas, people, viewpoints, cultures. And when we're dealing with problems that come, whether it's politically, socially, racially, or culturally, having that wide sweep of opinions helps. When we grow up, if there's ever an us versus them situation, if we know someone on the other side well, understand their viewpoints, why they come to such conclusions, even if we disagree, we are so much more likely to come to a productive conclusion and find solutions to solve these problems and heal divides, rather than antagonizing the other side, demonizing them, and bringing groups further and further apart. The Minor Minors second version is currently under the final stages of testing and will launch in the next month or so. If you adults wish you could go back in time so you can go back on Minor Minors, no worries. With our second version, we'll be launching parent communities, where you will be able to exchange with an international group of parents, something that doesn't yet exist today. I'm so excited for that to happen. When I started with Minor Minors 5 years ago, the concept was simple: make language learning easier. Now, I see the beginnings of something much larger, something that can solve the problems that we see today. It is my full intention to pursue this as far as I can, solving these problems with minor minors, changing the world one child at a time. Thank you so much for your time, and if you have any questions at all, please do ask me after this session. Thank you.